Welcome back, everybody. This is a video essay looking at the current state of the smartphone industry and why recently it seems like smartphones have been getting boring, and over the years I've become more and more hesitant to recommend upgrading to the newest phone, and I've had shorter and shorter answers to the question, so what's new about this phone? Let's take a look. So I've narrowed it down to 4 main reasons, and this is by no means an exhaustive list. There's plenty of more specific reasons that vary from company to company, but these are 4 overarching general reasons that the smartphone industry as a whole is getting more and more boring, regardless of what software the phone runs or what company is on the back. So the first reason I want to highlight is evolution through annualization. So ever since the very first iPhone, we've seen a lot more evolutionary features rather than revolutionary features. And while the iPhone is a good example as a starting point for modern day smartphones, this applies to all smartphones, not just iPhones. This is an easy one to explain. It's the reason that you see annual iterations of each phone rather than new phone models altogether. We're talking the Galaxy S6, S7, S8, or the iPhone 5, 6, 7, and each one of these iterations every year, we see small incremental upgrades, a slightly faster CPU, a slightly higher resolution screen, or maybe a slightly bigger battery. These aren't groundbreaking features, but they're just slight improvements. When you only have 1 year to come out with a new phone, there's only so much you can do. Research and development and manufacturing and marketing, those are all huge expenses and barriers to having huge revolutionary features. So rather than making the newest feature that you have to change all your manufacturing, you just make slight upgrades so you can use existing infrastructure, but as a result, those small changes we see year over year can seem kind of boring. The second reason is an increasing focus on software. So this goes hand in hand with annualization because you can only do so much with the hardware in a year's time. A lot of companies now are focusing on working more on the software side rather than the hardware side and trying to implement new features that way. On the one hand, this makes total sense. The hardware we have right now on our phones is capable of a lot, and sometimes a software feature is more noticeable than a hardware feature. Like look at a camera, for example. If you get 1 more megapixel on the camera, you're really not going to notice that, but if they use software and enable 4K video recording with the existing camera, then that's something you'll notice and actually have a tangible difference. But the downside to this is that they're also working on a 1-year time frame, and in most cases the new features are evolutionary, not revolutionary. When you only have a year, you're just going to build off the previous version of the software, and then in the end most of the new things are cosmetic changes. You're changing how it looks, not necessarily how it works, and that once again can come off as a little boring. The next reason is profit maximization, and this is a bit more sinister of a reason, but it's still important to mention. Smartphone companies really don't have that much incentive to create all new hardware and software, and that's because the smartphone market is already very saturated. Most smartphone customers already own a smartphone, so big established companies like Apple and Samsung are just trying to maintain their market share of the smartphone industry. And to do that, they just have to be different, and in most cases they already are a little different, so they don't need to make new radical changes to attract customers. Take a look at any big established smartphone company. They do this. They already have an established marketing direction, they already have brand loyalty with their customers, so they know they can release just small, unimpactful upgrades and people will still buy the phones. And because that's cheaper than doing radical changes, they make those small, unimpactful upgrades. Ecosystems also play a big role in this. Apple does a really good job of luring customers in and keeping them because of their ecosystem. So even if they change very little with a new iPhone, those people will still buy it because they're invested in the ecosystem. The bottom line here is that smartphone companies don't need to change that much to keep their customers, so they spend less on R&D and more on marketing. And the last reason is what I find the most interesting, a ceiling of innovation. And this concept basically says that there's only so much useful tech we can put in a phone, and most of it is already in the phone. So rather than being an intentional choice by the companies, they're making these small upgrades because that's all that's left there. There's no more big piece of the pie or radical changes to put in a phone because we're already using that space. They're already maximizing what a phone can do. So the concept goes that they're making small changes because that's all that's left. Steve Jobs more or less invented the blueprint of a modern smartphone with the original iPhone, and all things considered, a decade later, we haven't departed too far from that idea. So is it possible that we've done everything we can, or almost everything we can, with that original idea? My best example of this is looking at a new feature from the past and a new feature from, say, this last year. The original iPhone had a touchscreen, and that was a really big deal. And then the most recent iPhone has 2 cameras, okay? So that original touchscreen, when that came out as a new feature, that changed how you used phones. That changed everything, and that's really what we define smartphones as now. Whereas 2 cameras, that allows you to take pictures with a depth effect or zoom in optically a little bit more. Not all features are created equal. Now, I hope this one isn't true. I hope there's a lot more we can do with what goes into a smartphone, but to some degree, it kind of has to be true. You can only put so much technology that we have available today in a small smartphone that fits in your hand and your pocket. I don't know where on that scale we are, but that scale exists. So to conclude, smartphones are getting boring. I really want to know your input on this or your feedback. What of those reasons did you think was the most important or maybe the most telling? And then are there any reasons I left out that you can think of? It's a really interesting topic, and it kind of mirrors how I've become less interested in smartphones, because when people ask me about them, I don't care that much when a new iPhone comes out, because apart from the 10 this year, they just don't change that much year over year. And that's a phenomenon that I want to recognize, and I want to know what you guys think about that as well. As always, thank you for watching. Subscribe to see more content. And as always, stay classy.